Proceed with our second panel. The same rules apply as applied to the first panel. Each witness is to speak slowly and clearly into the microphone so that their testimony may be accurately transcribed. All previously submitted testimonies and PowerPoint presentations of the witnesses have been marked for identification by me and are admitted into the record of this proceeding. For the sake of time, the witnesses are asked to summarize or highlight their written testimony. For those witnesses who will give PowerPoint presentations today, please, while presenting, identify the content and number of each PowerPoint slide so that the transcript of this proceeding is clear. The witnesses are to proceed in the order that they appear on the agenda and are seated. The witnesses are to state their name, title, for whom they are employed, and on whose behalf they are appearing in this proceeding. The witness is to then proceed with his or her testimony. Each witness will be afforded 10 minutes. When a witness has 2 minutes left, a yellow light will come on or a yellow card will be flashed. And when a red light comes on or a red card is flashed, that means stop. The first witness on the second panel is Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Eric Miller. I'm the Policy Counsel for the Keystone Energy Efficiency Alliance, and I'm also testifying today on behalf of the Clean Air Council and Natural Resources Defense Council. KEA is an energy efficiency and advanced energy industry organization with over 60 state and national business members who provide advanced energy services and technologies to ratepayers, companies, and utilities across the Commonwealth. Together with the Clean Air Council, Natural Resources Defense Council, we are also parties to the settlement that resulted in last week's decoupling collaboratives held by PPL and PECO. We commend the Commission for holding this hearing on alternative rate-making methodologies and hope that both our written testimony and March 16th comments will assist the Commission as it moves forward on this important topic. Today, I will be summarizing KEA's written testimony. To begin, I'd like to touch on why KEA feels it's necessary to explore alternative rate designs. Technologies such as energy efficiency, demand response, advanced metering, and distributed generation are becoming more affordable and widespread. As a result, utilities are facing new and different costs, changes in customer demand, competition from behind-the-meter generation, and most important to our conversation today, flat or declining energy sales. Faced with these challenges, rate cases are occurring with greater frequency, some advanced energy programs are in danger of backsliding, and proposals for increased fixed charges are becoming more common. KEA believes this serves as an indication that Pennsylvania's current rate design is ill-suited to handle the transformation underway in the energy utility industry. Therefore, to meet these challenges and lay the groundwork for the utility of the future, KEA recommends the adoption of a full revenue decoupling mechanism complemented by performance incentive mechanisms, or PIMs. As stated by others today, revenue decoupling removes the utility's throughput incentive. Such a mechanism would offer a number of benefits over current rate design. First, the removal of the throughput incentive would make utilities indifferent to actions that would reduce electricity sales, such as energy efficiency, distributed generation, efficient building codes, and appliance standards, all of which are technologies that provide considerable energy system, ratepayer, and societal benefits, such as avoided T&D expenditures, reduced environmental compliance costs, health benefits, and increased reliability, among others. Further, revenue decoupling would stabilize utility revenues and prevent the over collection of revenues. Moreover, KEA believes it will obviate the need for increased fixed charges, which KEA and many other advocates here today do not support. Instead, it would allow for rates to remain volumetric, which allows customers to retain control of their bills and provides better payback periods for those who invest in advanced energy resources. Additionally, it would increase system efficiency by making cost control the best method by which a utility could increase its earnings between rate cases. Similarly, it would increase regulatory efficiency by ensuring that utilities meet their revenue requirement, no more, no less, without the need for a burdensome rate case every time a utility's collected revenues is out of line with its revenue requirement. Despite its advantages over traditional rate design, however, revenue decoupling only removes disincentives to pursuing advanced energy resources. It does not provide positive incentives for utilities to take action. Therefore, a decoupling mechanism should be complemented by performance incentive mechanisms that provide utilities with financial rewards for voluntarily taking action above and beyond their mandates. PIMs can be used for any number of metrics, including reliability, safety, plant efficiency, system loss, and many more. As it relates to energy efficiency, however, PIMs can be used to reward those utilities who voluntarily go beyond their mandates or create innovative programs to reach those ratepayers who have been underserved by existing programs, such as low-income customers. Further, KIA believes the Commission could implement PIMs using its existing authority to consider innovative rate design and performance-based rates. Taken together, we believe that revenue decoupling and PIMs represent the best pathway forward for Pennsylvania. However, KIA is not an advocate for decoupling at all costs, and we understand that poorly designed decoupling mechanisms in other states have caused some stakeholders to question the benefits of changing the current form of regulation. However, decoupling is sufficiently flexible and can include a number of design elements to protect customers. There are many, but I would like to briefly identify two that we feel are of particular importance. First, any decoupling mechanism can include periodic rate cases every 3 to 5 years to provide stakeholders with an opportunity for input. While rate cases remain an invaluable opportunity for stakeholder input and ensure that utilities recover their prudently incurred costs, rate cases that occur too frequently or not frequently enough can be burdensome on the parties involved or run the risk that a utility's collected revenues would not be in line with its costs. Revenue decoupling can strike a balance between the benefits and costs of rate cases by making them periodic and predictable. This will decrease overall costs and allow the Commission to ensure that a utility's revenue requirement still reflects their actual costs. Second, we recommend that decoupling include a 3% cap on the size of an adjustment that can take place in any one period. Bill stability is a serious concern for KIA and for other advocates. While decoupling adjustments do not usually result in more than a 3% change in customer bills in each period, and 40% of observed adjustments have actually been downward, a cap on adjustments can provide additional protections. For the average Pennsylvania customer, a 3% increase in their monthly bill would amount to around $2.80. For many, this would not be noticeable in the context of regular month-to-month bill volatility, as shown on the chart on page 9 and 10 of our written testimony. However, KIA does understand that for some, especially those low-income users incapable of reducing usage, this could be significant. For those customers, the Commission could include targeted PIMs to encourage utilities to better reach those customers not historically reached using existing program. And I would reiterate that when compared to other methods by which to stabilize utility revenues, such as increased fixed charges, decoupling that includes these protections definitely seems preferable. While these are just two important considerations of designing revenue decoupling mechanisms, there are others, such as interclass cost shifting, that we will address in more detail in our March 16th comments. Before I conclude, I'd like to briefly discuss the other alternative rate design mechanisms identified by the Commission: straight fixed variable rate design and loss margin recovery mechanisms. Straight fixed variable rate design, like decoupling, largely insulates utility revenue from changes in energy sales. Proponents of straight fixed variable design argue that this better reflects the principles of cost causation. However, such a rate design presents serious concerns when compared to decoupling. First, there's the issue of what a fixed cost is. On a longer planning horizon faced by many utilities, many of the fixed cost elements can actually be considered variable and would result in energy being priced below its long-run marginal costs. Second, small users, especially seniors, low-income households, apartment dwellers, and those who use alternative energy resources would end up paying much higher electricity bills and subsidizing those with the highest energy consumption because the fixed charge would make up a larger portion of their bill. Third, consumer investments in energy efficiency would be discouraged under this design, since bill savings are smaller than they would have been otherwise. Fourth, straight fixed variable rate designs seem to run counter to the original purpose of public utility regulation, which is to prevent the exercise of monopoly pricing by natural monopoly. Competitive pricing has been imparted on utilities through existing volumetric prices, which require them to compete with other energy sources, such as distributed generation, energy efficiency, and alternative providers. The concept that customers should cover the short-run fixed costs of a utility merely for being a customer is not practiced in nearly any other competitive industry and should not be practiced in the context of utilities. Finally, while loss margin recovery mechanisms are preferable to straight fixed variable rate design, they do not have all the advantages of revenue decoupling. It would remove the incentive that the utilities have to implement their own programs, but it would not impact any other aspect of the throughput incentive that creates barriers for customer-funded energy efficiency and other advanced resources. In closing, Kia believes that given the transition underway in the utility energy industry, that continuing with a business-as-usual rate design no longer seems viable. Kia believes that to meet these challenges, revenue decoupling performance incentive mechanisms present the best pathway forward for the Commonwealth. Thank you, Commissioners, for holding this hearing today, and we look forward to answering any questions you might have. That concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Koch?
Thank you. My name is Scott Koch, and I'm a financial analyst with PPL Electric Utilities Corporation. I would like to thank you for providing PPL Electric with an opportunity to testify today and share its views on alternative rate-making methodologies. Pennsylvania has made tremendous strides in providing utilities with progressive rate-making methods. Utilities in the state currently have the ability to utilize several rate recovery mechanisms that can be considered alternative rate-making. These include cost trackers, the distribution system improvement charge, and the use of a fully projected future test year. Pennsylvania utilities currently use a cost tracker to recover expenses associated with the conservation initiatives and programs required by Act 129. The cost tracker has allowed Pennsylvania utilities to implement numerous programs to reduce electricity demand and energy use. To date, most Pennsylvania utilities have successfully met Act 129 compliance targets. PPL Electric has consistently exceeded its energy efficiency and conservation targets since the implementation of Act 129. Updating the current statute to allow for increased spending or allow utilities to receive incentive if targets are met or exceeded could promote more conservation. Additionally, PPL Electric believes that legislative changes to remove the disincentives that exist in Act 129 could be an effective way to promote energy efficiency. PPL Electric also fully supports appropriate energy conservation measures to encourage customers to use less energy, but believes that it is critical to consider more than just energy efficiency and conservation when designing rates and evaluating alternative rate making. Costs of providing service for distribution operations are either customer-based or demand-based. Despite this, a large portion of residential distribution revenue is collected through a usage charge. PPL Electric believes proper recovery of cost is necessary to provide the proper price signals. These price signals allow customers to make educated, properly informed decisions when investing time and money into energy efficiency and conservation programs, which are fundamental functions of usage. Additionally, proper rate design may reduce cross-subsidization both within and across customer classes. PPL Electric has and will continue to work towards a rate structure that is fair and provides proper recovery and price signals for our customers. PPL Electric will continue to use a variety of mechanisms such as reconcilable riders, the distribution system improvement charge, and a fully projected future test year to provide full and timely recovery of our costs. A combination of mechanisms and policies are needed to provide fair recovery of prudent costs and investments in distribution infrastructure. Currently, PPL Electric's residential fixed charges are lower than the cost to service a customer. Under PPL Electric's current residential rate structure, 90% of the average residential customer's bill is usage-based. Rate design needs to be updated for residential customers to lessen the reliance upon usage-based charges to recover fixed costs, which can create a cost shift between the different customers. In this case, the gain for one customer is the loss of another customer. Updating rates to recover the true fixed costs through fixed charges reduces the risk of cost shifting. With regards to PPL Electric's commercial and industrial customers, we currently collect our distribution charges through using demand and also fixed rates. This approach provides proper price signals for these customers while at the same time providing clear energy efficiency savings from Act 129 through demand reductions as well as lower generation charges on our customers' bills. Although PPL Electric believes revenue decoupling can reduce the lost revenue disincentive by making utilities whole for those revenues, it does not necessarily incentivize the utility or customers to invest in or adopt energy efficiency and conservation plans. To properly incentivize utilities, incentive programs can be implemented to reward performance if targets are met or exceeded. Alternative rate-making methods require additional utility resources as well as increased oversight by the regulators. These methods require more data and additional scrutiny to verify the numbers provided. Even with alternative rate-making methods, utilities will most likely continue to file periodic base rate cases to recover additional capital investments as well as increases in costs. Any alternative rate-making method that is proposed would have to be studied and implemented carefully to avoid conflict of recovery incentives with current mechanisms that are already in place. PPL Electric believes a uniform alternative rate mechanism for all Pennsylvania utilities may not be optimal. There are many variations and options of alternative rate making, and it's crucial to set up the mechanism correctly based on the unique characteristics of both the customers and the company. The alternatives can include performance-based rate making, additional automatic adjustment clauses, and many variations of revenue decoupling. A combination of mechanisms would be recommended for different recovery streams. If a rate mechanism is properly designed and executed, it will encourage utilities to better implement energy efficiency and conservation programs. It will be just and reasonable and in the public interest, and its benefits will outweigh its costs. In conclusion, all stakeholders should continue to evaluate and research options to correctly establish the best rate-making mechanism for both customers and the utilities. Rate design preferences will vary by utility based on the company's unique financial and operating characteristics. Customer rates need to be fair, reasonable, and easy to understand. Proper rate making should avoid rate volatility and mitigate any large cost shifts between customers and provide accurate price signals to those customers. PPL Electric is looking forward to working with other stakeholders to help shape successful rate-making methods that are fair and reasonable, and believes Pennsylvania utilities should continue to investigate options for optimal rate-making approaches. Further evaluation and education is needed by all stakeholders on current rate-making practices as well as new alternative rate-making options. Thank you again for the opportunity to present this testimony on this important issue.
Thank you, Mr. Koch. Ms. Strauss.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Brown, Vice Chairman Place, and Commissioners. My name is Paula Strauss, and I'm the Director of Regulatory Strategy and Support for NiSource, which is the parent company of Columbia Gas of Pennsylvania. On behalf of Columbia, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to appear before this commission and to offer comments concerning alternative rate-making methodologies. My principal responsibilities at NiSource include all regulatory activities for Columbia Gas of Pennsylvania. I oversee and prepare regulatory filings and provide support for base rate cases. In Columbia's 2012 base rate case, I served as the rate design witness, where I supported 3 residential rate design options. NiSource operates under the Columbia Gas brand name and serves over 3 million customers in 7 states. The company does not support a one-size-fits-all strategy. It is important that each company be reviewed to determine which rate designs may best serve the utility and its customers. Today, I will review the rate design options that Columbia and NiSource have proposed. Slide 2 shows the rate designs that Columbia has proposed since 2011. These designs include a levelized distribution charge, or LDC, a revenue normalization adjustment, or RNA, and a weather normalization adjustment, which is known as a WNA. At this time, Columbia has a pilot WNA in Pennsylvania. However, the LDC is Columbia's preferred rate design for Pennsylvania. Under LDC, fixed distribution costs, which are not impacted by customer usage, are recovered through a fixed charge. Base revenues are linked to customer count instead of gas throughput, and customers pay the same fixed amount for distribution service each month. Gas costs continue to be charged on the basis of commodity usage. Columbia recently also proposed an RNA and a WNA. RNA utilizes benchmark distribution revenues. Columbia's proposed RNA was designed to break the link between distribution revenue and gas consumed. The company would refund amounts over the baseline and would collect amounts below. Like the LDC, under RNA, gas costs are recovered on a usage basis. Under Columbia's WNA pilot program, residential customers' bills are based on actual weather experienced. Columbia's WNA includes a 5% deadband, which means adjustments only occur if actual heating degree days are lower than 95% or higher than 105% of normal. Columbia has filed reports concerning its WNA for the past 2 heating seasons. Both of those seasons were colder than normal, so the company billed less to residential customers. The current heating season has been warmer than normal, so Columbia has billed more. On slide 3, I will continue with a discussion of the benefits of LDC. One reason for favoring the LDC is that it more accurately reflects cost causation. Columbia's costs to provide distribution service to residential customers do not vary with usage. A rate design should follow costs. Usage-based recovery of fixed costs causes lower use customers to be subsidized by higher use customers. An LDC would remove these cross subsidies. Further, a proper price signal may help to provide clarity to customers shopping for choice service. On their bills, customers would see a flat pipes charge and a variable gas commodity charge, which would help to clarify the difference between distribution and choice. Accurate price signals are also important for customers considering energy efficiency measures. When fixed costs are recovered on a usage basis, customers perceive, conservation savings are distorted because customers receive bill reductions with no matching decrease in cost for the utility. As a result, the utility needs to reset its rate to recover actual costs. With volumetric base rates, customers investing in conservation see their expected benefits eroded by these rate cases. This may encourage other customers to adopt conservation. However, it discourages additional conservation from early adopters. On the other hand, with LDC, customers would receive efficient price signals and install energy efficiency measures by evaluating the true gas commodity cost. The LDC results in reduced bill volatility since all distribution costs are recovered through a fixed charge. One possible benefit of this bill stability concerns an economic analysis performed to determine the feasibility of adding new load. Currently, Columbia relies on usage projections to determine base revenues. The lower a customer's expected usage due to things like more efficient or fewer appliances, the less likely a line extension would be economically justified. But under LDC, Columbia would rely on expected revenues from a fixed monthly charge and remove the volumetric forecasts from this equation. Another possible advantage of LDC concerns the Distribution System Improvement Charge, or DISC. The LDC coupled with DISC may provide Columbia with the best opportunity to remain out of a rate case. Enhanced revenue stability may influence Columbia's decision to utilize the DISC and recover capital after it has been installed, instead of filing a rate case and using a fully forecasted rate year. Residential bills are greatly simplified with the LDC. Customers are given the correct price signal regarding distribution, and they see the gas commodity charges. Changing to a flat rate for distribution should not be viewed as confusing, since residential customers pay for many services on a fixed basis. These services include telephone, cable, internet access, and trash removal. Additionally, some customers are familiar with levelized monthly billing since they utilize budget billing. The information technology, or IT, costs associated with implementing an LDC would be minimal. Bills would no longer display a volumetric base rate. After an initial one-time billing change, ongoing IT costs would likely be comparable to existing costs. An LDC would not include any adjustments, so a cap would not be necessary. On the other hand, WNA and RNA include adjustments based on weather or benchmark revenues. While these rate mechanisms may be beneficial, they are more complex to implement and maintain. An LDC would not unfairly impact new customers. All non-cap residential customers, regardless of when they came onto the company's system, would pay the same fixed distribution cost. Also, low-income customers are not disadvantaged. In Columbia's 2011 rate case, data was presented concerning customers participating in energy assistance programs. This data demonstrated that the average annual usage of these customers exceeded the usage of Columbia's other residential customers. This is consistent with more recent data. During the 12 months ended November 2015, the average CAP customer on Columbia's system consumed approximately 980 therms, while the average non-CAP residential customer consumed about 720 therms. My fourth and final slide concerns the rate designs approved across NiSource. As discussed, Columbia has a WNA in Pennsylvania with a 5% deadband. Columbia of Maryland, along with Kentucky and Virginia, all have WNA programs with no deadbands. In addition to WNA, Maryland and Virginia have RNA mechanisms. Columbia of Massachusetts and Ohio have decoupling programs. Ohio's LDC was phased in with an initial change occurring in December of 2008. 1 year later, the second rate change occurred and became effective in December of 2009, and the LDC has remained constant for new and existing customers since that date. In closing, Columbia has determined that the use of alternative rate designs is appropriate and beneficial for residential customers. Rate design options should be carefully considered since there is not a single rate design applicable in all circumstances. For the reasons discussed today and in my written testimony, Columbia Gas of Pennsylvania's preferred rate design option is a levelized distribution charge. On behalf of Columbia, I want to thank you for your time and for this opportunity to present the company's views concerning rate design options.
Thank you, Ms. Strauss. Ms. McCloskey?
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Brown, Vice Chairman Place, and Commissioners. My name is Tanya McCloskey. I'm the Acting Consumer Advocate for the Office of Consumer Advocate. I provided written testimony, which is posted on the Commission's website, and my office will be providing detailed comments on March 16th. Today, I'll give a brief overview of my testimony, particularly as it concerns revenue decoupling and energy efficiency in Pennsylvania, and answer any questions you may have. The Office of Consumer Advocate has long supported the development of cost-effective energy efficiency and demand response programs in Pennsylvania. The OCA's involvement with these programs stretches back to the 1980s as Pennsylvania became a leader in delivering energy efficiency to low-income customers as part of our low-income usage reduction programs. The OCA also supported efforts throughout the years to extend energy efficiency and demand response programs to all residential customers. The OCA viewed and continues to view energy efficiency as an important part of delivering just and reasonable rates and affordable bills to all Pennsylvanians. In 2008, the General Assembly in Pennsylvania saw the need for legislative action to develop a comprehensive energy policy. At the time of the General Assembly's action, the PJM wholesale markets, upon which our energy prices depend, were experiencing instability and price volatility. As Pennsylvania's rate caps that were established during restructuring were soon set to expire, Pennsylvania ratepayers were facing the possibility of significant increases in prices. The General Assembly passed what has become known as Act 129 to address these circumstances. Act 129 had three legs to the stool. It had default service procurement, energy efficiency and demand response programs, and smart meter deployment. Two of these, energy efficiency and smart meter deployment, are key to our discussion here today. In Act 129, the General Assembly provided a balanced and comprehensive regulatory structure for the implementation of energy efficiency in Pennsylvania. Act 129 contains both carrots and sticks to achieve the energy efficiency and demand response intended by the General Assembly within the spending limitations set by the General Assembly. The utilities are provided full and current cost recovery of the cost of implementing the programs under Act 129 through an automatic surcharge without regard to their overall earnings. The utilities also could be subject to penalties if they fail to achieve the mandated goals. Act 129 was clear, however, that decreased revenues resulting from the implementation of the programs were not to be recovered in the surcharge mechanism between base rate cases. Decreased revenues were to be addressed on a prospective basis in the course of a base rate case. In my view, Act 129 has worked well. In Phase 1, ratepayers have supported over $800 million of spending on a wide range of programs, producing approximately 5.4 million megawatt hours per year in verified energy savings and 1,540 megawatts of demand reduction. Statewide, this is 123% of the mandated energy savings for Phase 1 and 113% of the mandated demand reduction goal. Phase 2 is proving equally successful, and we are now preparing to continue the success in Phase 3. In addition, our LIRE programs, our low-income usage reduction programs, are continuing to expand to better serve the needs of low-income customers. In 2014, our residential electric ratepayers supported approximately $30 million for LIRE programs, and gas ratepayers supported approximately $18 million for LIRE programs. This is in addition to the spending on the Act 129 programs that reach all residential customers as well as specifically targeted low-income customer programs. At the same time, under Act 129, our electric utilities are deploying smart meter infrastructure and recovering those costs on a full and current basis through a surcharge mechanism, again, without regard to overall earnings. The smart meter deployment is being accompanied by the implementation of voluntary time of use pricing and real-time pricing plans with no recovery of decreased revenues allowed through the surcharge for these pricing programs. This brings me to the question of whether revenue decoupling or other similar rate mechanism would encourage utilities to better implement energy efficiency and conservation programs in Pennsylvania. In my view, given the rate-making methodologies we have in place and the legislative direction we have been given, it is not clear how any form of revenue decoupling will further advance the goals that Pennsylvania is seeking to achieve. Pennsylvania has robust energy efficiency programs within the mandates of Act 129 and a robust distribution base rate process that now allows for the use of a fully forecasted future test year where prospective decreases in revenues can be properly addressed. The Pennsylvania regulatory model has achieved the proper balance of costs and benefits for Pennsylvania and its ratepayers. The Commission also questions whether it would be just and reasonable and in the public interest to adopt such rate mechanisms. In answering this question, along with the discussion of just and reasonable rates in my written testimony, consideration must be given to the other policies that the Commission and the Commonwealth seeks to achieve. Pennsylvania also has a number of policy initiatives, such as main extensions, infrastructure replacement, and retail competition that may not be fully compatible with alternative rate-making methodologies such as revenue decoupling, or may dampen any purported benefits of revenue decoupling. Before closing, I would like to take a moment on the impact of revenue decoupling on low-income customers. A great deal of focus in the revenue decoupling debate is put on the customer's total bill and the argument that the change in the usage rate occasioned by revenue decoupling is generally small. There was an estimate provided here today that it may only be about $3 per month in Pennsylvania. Many of us sitting here may find that to be a small amount, but such amounts can be the difference between affordable and unaffordable bills for many low-income residential customers. Studies have shown that even small increases in monthly bills of less than $5 can increase the rate of non-payment by low-income customers. those costs that are not paid by the low-income customers and the increasing costs of our CAP programs are borne by all other residential ratepayers. Additionally, for CAP customers, these customers have already evidenced an inability to pay their current bills. Equally important, though, these customers are being asked to absorb increased costs through a revenue decoupling when they may not be able to engage in energy efficiency due to the lack of financial means to pay for the necessary investment, the lack of ownership of their residence or business, or the inability to reduce energy usage any further due to health and safety concerns. As ever-increasing costs are shifted to these customers, the unfairness also increases. Thank you again for the opportunity to present this testimony today. I look forward to your questions and the continuing dialogue as to how to best move Pennsylvania into the future.
Thank you, Ms. McCloskey. Mr. Ciarlone.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Brown, Vice Chairman Place, and Commissioners Powelson, Commissioners Paulson, Coleman, and Whitmer. My name is David Ciarlone. I am the Senior Manager for Energy and Carbon at Alcoa. Today, I represent the industrial and energy consumers of Pennsylvania. IACPA commends the Commission for initiating a constructive dialogue of these important timely topics. We are eager to play our part, and we appreciate the opportunity to do so. At the core of these discussions are the three questions posed by the Commission in the hearing notice. In each case, our answers are firm but respectful no. By way of background, many of our IACPA members, and in fact many of the manufacturers across the Commonwealth, are what have become known as energy-intensive, trade-exposed businesses. Energy-intensive means that even small increases in energy prices translate into large increases in energy costs that further translate into significant decreases in profitability. Trade-exposed means that these manufacturers serve customers who are able to fill their needs from competing suppliers around the globe. A trade-exposed manufacturer operating in Pennsylvania that passes cost increases onto a customer risks losing that customer to a global competitor. These businesses must proactively manage all their costs, and they need to squeeze every bit of productivity from what they spend on land, buildings, raw material, people, and energy. My testimony demonstrates that we practice energy efficiency with or without rebates, and whether or not anyone is watching, we live energy efficiency every day because of the competition we face. IACPA's views on alternative rate-making methodologies, as with energy policy in general, are shaped by applying what we call our 5 guiding principles: affordability, reliability, stability, predictability, and sustainability. Of particular note in this discussion are stability and predictability. Stability is important because our stakeholders demand financial results that do not vary wildly month to month. Predictability is important because our stakeholders need to trust that we can write long-term business plans on which we can reliably deliver. The application of our guiding principles lead us into a few expectations on rate making. Cost of service. Utility revenue should be sufficient to sustain its operations over long term and should consist of the recovery of all prudently incurred expenses, plus an opportunity to earn a fair return on all used and useful capital investment, and not $1 more. Cost causation. Rates should be designed to achieve a single purpose: to collect the appropriate revenues from customers in a manner that corresponds to the cost that each customer imposes upon the utility system. Maintenance and reliability. Certain expenses and investments required to ensure adequate system reliability should be included in rates, and utilities should exercise a degree of diligence and care in the planning and maintenance of their facilities so that expenses and investments can be predicted and planned. Appropriate oversight. Periodic comprehensive review of rates is the best way to ensure that both utilities and customers enjoy the reliable service and the collection of revenues that are appropriate and fairly allocated. In other words, just and reasonable rates. Focus on purpose. Using utility rates to encourage outcomes unrelated to the fair allocation of revenues and appropriate to ensure reliable service, no matter how worthy, will almost invariably violate one or more of our guiding principles and open the door to unintended consequences and perverse incentives. We now highlight the parts of our answers to 3 questions posed by the Commission. First, whether revenue decoupling and similar rate mechanisms encourage energy utilities to better implement energy efficiency and conservation programs. It's constructive to underscore that both large energy-intensive customers and utilities alike, decoupling creates the ultimate of perverse incentives. It eliminates the most efficient positive reinforcement for positive action. For large energy-intensive customers, decoupling eliminates the incentive to make incremental investment in energy efficiency. For the utility, decoupling eliminates a significant incentive to rapid restoration of service after storm-related outage. Second, whether these rate mechanisms are just and reasonable and in the public interest. These mechanisms are a departure from the principle of cost causation and causes high load factor customers to subsidize low load factor customers who create the need for the underutilized facilities. Decoupled utility rates would introduce a degree of arbitrary and subjective decision-making criteria that would create uncertainty and be harmful to the rate-making process, especially for large C&I customers. Clearly, whatever form we're talking about with respect to decoupling would result in a violation of at least two of our guiding principles, stability and predictability. Third, whether the benefits of implementing such rate mechanisms outweigh any costs associated with implementing the rate mechanisms. By decoupling the cost of using something from what it costs to make it, we introduced artificial and arbitrary incentives that almost inevitably lead to unintended consequences. Our conclusions and recommendations. Following is a quick list of our recommendations and conclusions. Manufacturing is critical to the Commonwealth's present and future prosperity, and policy should support the retention and growth of sustainable, energy-intensive, trade-exposed industries. Energy-intensive, trade-exposed industrials, including IACMA members, rely upon energy efficiency as an important tool in their businesses and implement energy efficiency projects and practices to the maximum extent that is cost beneficial. 3, the implementation of decoupling or similar alternate rate-making mechanisms would first require changes to state law. 4, decoupling does not encourage either utilities or large C&I customers to better implement energy efficiency and conservation programs. 5, decoupling produces rates that are not just and reasonable or in the public interest. 6, decoupling could in fact hurt energy-intensive, trade-exposed businesses by making them pay costs that they did not cause or benefit under rates that are neither stable or predictable. 7, the best way to encourage energy efficiency as well as other desired behaviors is to ensure that rates reflect the actual cost of service and that they are allocated to those customers who cause or benefit from them. 8, the Commonwealth if the Commonwealth elects to use decoupling or similar alternate rate-making mechanisms to encourage energy efficiency, the measure should not include large C&I customers. I give the judge back any time I didn't use, and I appreciate the opportunity to represent the industrials in Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ciarlone. Madam Chairman, Commissioners, any questions for the second panel?
Thank you. Let me call on Commissioner Powelson for any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I thank the panelists for your comments here this morning. I want to start with Mr. Miller's comments, and it's a comment that I think I mentioned earlier, that there's a concern here at the Commission about this potential backsliding. And if there were a scenario where we did have backsliding in E&C in Pennsylvania, I guarantee you legislators and mayors and people who are participating in this market, I think there'd be a huge backlash to the Commission. So I commend you for kind of putting that out there. And there was a comment also made by the PPL representative, Mr. Koch, about if the rate measure is properly designed. Well, let me just say, in decades of rate making, probably going back to the great George I. Bloom, this commission has been extremely diligent in adopting rate mechanisms that incentivize utilities to invest. In your company in particular, with a regulated utility in Kentucky, in the UK, and Pennsylvania, I need not remind you about your incremental capital investment through your ROE that comes through Pennsylvania, not the other two utilities. So my point is, I get a lot of, staying on in this theme of backsliding, that I do believe through a collaborative process, we could design, not a one size fits all, but we could design with groups like Kia, the Electric Power Association, and the Consumer Advocate and others. I want to throw this question out. Do you think through a collaborative process we could design a decoupling model that serves all customers? And Tanya, I know I heard your point about potential $3 spike in cost to customers, but you do know we also have addressed issues around pipeline safety and the cost. In just the case of Philadelphia, $1.68 on the bill to take an 88-year replacement schedule down to 44. If we got caught up in the weeds, we'd never be able to make that decision. So I might take a little different tack to say, I think customers in Pennsylvania, and you and I both represent 12.3 million of them, are embracing these programs, and there is a concern about potential backsliding. So I just throw that out. The question being, how can we really, rather than saying no, how can we really harness this discussion to not only educate legislators, but with the capacity here at the commission to potentially implement something? So, Eric, I'm going to let you start.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Powelson. So I think that to answer your question squarely, we can definitely, I think, work together in a collaborative process to design something that meets the needs and concerns of all stakeholders. As Kia was kind of getting up to speed with the different options of decoupling, it became clear that there's a multitude of options and there's a lot of flexibility in design to meet the needs of an individual state. And I think that a big first step was education. I'm sure a lot of groups here today really had to get up to speed to understand what was out there. And I think we've kind of reached that step. So I think the decoupling collaboratives last week were helpful. I think moving forward, something that moves us closer to something like a collaborative process for a straw man to actually go point by point on what things would look like would be incredibly helpful. But I think that probably every stakeholder group has their own take on the speed of that process. But we think that definitely can be done.
We feel, the rate design needs to sort of come first before we take that next step. We're obviously open to speaking and learning more about the different alternative rate making methods. But we feel that that price signal and the cost shift issue needs to be taken care of first before we can take that next step and go down those different methods.
I would just like to agree that a collaborative process, I think, would help to educate everyone.
Okay.
Just a few responses, and we are participating in the collaborative and intend to continue to participate in those. Just on the backsliding, again, I think we have a good process in place to try to prevent that. The commission sets the targets through aggressive evaluation and work from the statewide evaluator, who performs an independent analysis of what is achievable both technically and within the program budgets that we have. And we do have very significant penalties if utilities backslide. And I have done this a long time, and I've worked in all the stakeholder process groups for developing the energy efficiency programs. And I can say that, in my view, that penalty structure has captured the attention of all of the utilities, and they have worked very hard and very diligently to develop these programs and keep achieving the goals that the commission has set for them. On the $1.68 on gas safety, I certainly agree with you, but you can't just look at one charge. It's $1.08 for the gas safety, an additional $1.08 over the 5% that was already there. So we probably are up over $5 for the gas safety and the DSIC, but we also have the recovery of the energy efficiency costs. We have the recovery of the smart meter costs, and many of our utilities have a large number of additional surcharges, all of which, by the way, would operate outside of revenue decoupling. We have very large expense recovery surcharges here in Pennsylvania that give dollar for dollar recovery. And just on the one size fits all, I agree that one size doesn't necessarily fit all, but I have a real concern about making sure that we aren't simply applying this to one utility who might be having some revenue decline, where the utility that's having revenue growth gets to keep those dollars. So if you're going to look at that, you have to look at it more broadly and not simply apply it to the utility that it seems to benefit best. I think you have to look at it overall and for all utilities and all customer impacts.
Yeah, and I guess this will be my last point. It's just on that note. I mean, we've learned through the success of the DISC, one of the real silver linings of the DISC has been getting away from this biannual rate case filing scenario, which existed prior to DISC, where those 3 to 4 year filings are a real benefit to customers. Now, I know there's some people in Harrisburg, and no disrespect to the regulatory lawyers in the room, but I imagine you would like a rate case every 2 years. We happen to not like rate cases. And Tanya, I'm going to put you on the spot because you don't need to answer that question. But my point is that 3 to 4 year, I want to say look at, that 3 to 4 year rate case filing in a decoupling world, hey, we might be out looking out 5 to 6 years now, because DISC is serving us pretty well there. But we all know that average rate case cost is $1.6 million plus in Pennsylvania that customers are having to pay for. And, so my question to you is, wouldn't decoupling theoretically push some of those rate cases out even further?
Well, I think there are 2 points. And one is we have had a long time, particularly on the electric side of the equation, between rate cases. Some of our utilities were out 20 years. And with restructuring, we reset some of those rates, and they were out even since 1996. Rate cases are starting to come more routinely because we are engaging in large infrastructure. And the one thing, a periodic rate case isn't a bad thing. I do want to say that, because as both investment changes over time and as usage changes over time, cost responsibility changes. So having that periodic opportunity to review the cost responsibility as it is being impacted by the different initiatives, we have both infrastructure and usage initiatives, I think is an important protection for consumers. And it gives us a chance to look at rates and rate design.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And again, thank you to our panelists for some great thought-provoking testimony this morning. I want to stay on the theme of this cost-shifting discussion. And I guess my comment is probably focused more to this side of the table in the testimony. The old adage, follow the money here. And I'm to help me reconcile the testimony. So as I understand, there's concern for low-income customers in decoupling, and I understand there's concern for the industrial customers in decoupling. So the first part of my question is, so who is the big beneficiary in each of your minds in decoupling? And the second part of the question is, in the flexibility that we're talking about, and a number of the testifiers have offered, is there a way to reconcile those differences?
I'll start. I spoke in my testimony here to the low-income issue, but I don't want to at all ignore moderate-income customers as well. They are often, we define low-income in Pennsylvania as 150% of federal poverty and below. We have a lot of customers between 151 and 250 that struggle each and every day to pay their utility bills and don't have the necessary income or the ownership of their residence to be able to engage in energy efficiency. But I also would say that we've been looking at decoupling, and I think the first panel and throughout the discussion, as what it does for the utility and not necessarily what it does for the customer. And I think that is the problem with decoupling, is that it doesn't increase any incentive by the customer to conserve. So the customers that seem to benefit are those that can reduce their usage more than the percentage increase that they're going to see in revenue decoupling. I can't sit here today and tell you how many of customers that would be in Pennsylvania, but we've already engaged in a lot of energy efficiency. We've reached a lot of those customers who've, reached their maximum of what they're able to do. So I don't know if that responds to your question, but that is a concern. I think the other concern from the customer's viewpoint, and it was spoken about a little bit in the first panel, is that is the education. You want to be sure that by making these adjustments and seeing rates and usage rates go up and the inability to really respond to that, it tends to give energy efficiency a bad name in customers' minds, and that's certainly not where we want to be. Right now, I think energy efficiency has a good name in Pennsylvania because we have, through the requirements of Act 129, been able to reach out specifically to all customers.
So there's a few things going on. First of all, decoupling is one of those words that so many people have used it in so many different applications. I'm not really sure I understand what it means when people just use the word decoupling. But to the extent it has to do with adjusting the amount of cost that you pay to follow your usage, first of all, large industrial customers, for the most part, if you want to have their costs be variable, that's already been done. I mean, those of us who are shopping, in the typical case, 95% of our monthly bills is the energy charge that goes up and down with the market and with our volume. And we have mechanisms in our companies to manage our suppliers and manage our consumption and to know what that's going to be. And like I say, manage our consumption. I'm pretty happy talking about our energy efficiency programs with anybody anywhere. I don't think I'm worried about backsliding. We have global markets that'll punish us far more severely than anybody here will if we don't make the best use of our resources. With respect to decoupling, as I understand it, though, that 5% of our invoice that is a distribution charge, a utility charge, almost none of that is variable. About 3% or so are fixed customer charges, and the rest are demand-based. Even the riders that we pay into are demand-based riders. And it's important for us that they follow costs so we can predict what they are and we can keep them stable. To the extent they would fluctuate and move around, creates that kind of unpredictability and instability of our rates that give us a problem with our stakeholders. And before we rush to say, well, it's only 5% of the bill, how big of a problem is it? 5% of a big number is still a pretty big number. And that's a number, as I say, that goes right to our profitability because we can't share that with our customers. So that's the foundation of our concern, if that's helpful.
It is to a certain extent. Maybe I'm missing the point here, but so in the current rate design, there is a suggestion that the industrial customers are subsidizing low-income customers.
No, that's not at all. It wasn't. My question, my statement of subsidization had nothing to do with low income. My statement of subsidization had to do with the way the rates are designed to begin with respect to load factor. Those who make the most efficient and most complete use of the resources versus, say, a residential customer who doesn't make a very complete utilization of the resource. There's a lot of distribution resources that a utility has to install and maintain that are not fully utilized because they're needed for the residential load. Whereas for the industrial with a load factor of 80% or higher, almost all of the facilities installed to serve the industrial load are used with a high degree of frequency. And that's what I'm trying to reflect in terms of the subsidization, not high income, low income. It's got to do with high load factor, low load factor, and how the physical system is being utilized.
Let me just stay on it one more point. So we're talking about a cost shift here, and I'm still trying to understand where's the cost shifting from, and where's the cost going to. There's the testimony I'm hearing is that low-income customers have the potential of being harmed in decoupling. So that's assuming
Again,
that.
I want to take the low income concern off the table. As Chair, Mr. Powelson, I keep on saying, I'm sorry, as Commissioner Powelson has correctly noted, and as other witnesses have noted, there is a safety net that exists already for low income. And we're not talking about changing that at all. And if the state sees fit that things need to be done to supplement that, that's fine. That's part of living in the Commonwealth. We're okay with that. My concern is stems from situations in other states where we have seen rate designs take allocations of fixed costs and demand charges entirely onto a volumetric basis. And then when you do that, you destroy the value of load factor. And that's where our concern is coming from.
Okay. Thank you. Again, thank you to all of our panelists. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. Commissioner Whitmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Miller, several of the other panelists have indicated that they believe that should we pursue something along the line of alternative rate making, regardless of what form it is, would necessitate a legislative change. Does Kia and the others that you are representing today have the same position?
Kia is still working on refining our position as to, I guess, every kind of step that could be taken with regard to the Commission's existing authority. We do feel, though, however, that the prohibitions in Act 129 are very, very, very clear, but they are very narrow. So that's something that we're hoping to look into more, and are interested in the Commission's position on that as well.
Okay, thank you. This question is addressed, I think, more toward, again, to Mr. Miller and to Ms. McCloskey. Several folks have mentioned that bills, would be changing frequently. And while it might be small adjustments here and there, we have certainly seen some backlash from consumers when they feel that variability and that they don't perhaps necessarily understand it. How much education do you think should be devoted up front before implementation of this type of a program, should we go down that path toward educating the public?
I definitely think making rates clear to the public is important. I think in the way we spoke about decoupling and other alternative mechanisms today seems very complicated once you get into the minutia, but I do think that public education could be relatively easy, in that rates still do remain volumetric, and I think it's easy to explain what a baseline is for requirements. So I don't think it's something that would take necessarily too long before it could be moved forward with and the public was properly educated.
Yeah, and I do think it might depend on the type of revenue decoupling and the details of it, because as Eric points out, it could be extraordinarily complex, or it could be a simpler type of adjustment. But I do think you have to educate consumers, particularly if you're going to be making a significant change in the way they are viewing their bills and the way their bills are coming to them. And it should occur before it takes effect, would be my recommendation.
And just one follow-up, who would pay for that education?
Well, I think, again, that always becomes an issue, but as I'm sure the utilities would want to see that recovered in their rates.
Vice Chairman Place.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Miller, quick question. The argument Mr. Ciarlone made about potentially opting out for trade-exposed, energy-intensive industries. What's your response? Assuming for the moment, we can define what that is.
Yes, Vice Chairman Place. I believe that testimony raises a lot of important points, and I think that's something that the panel this morning, I'm sure, is a group of experts who've done a lot of research on the differences in between residential class, commercial class, and large industrial users. And I do think that large industrial users do somewhat present different challenges for a decoupling mechanism. I'm not necessarily sure on what design elements address that and whether it necessarily becomes an opt-out, but I do think that the characteristics of large industrial consumers and energy-intensive operations do have to be considered with a bit of a different lens than residential and commercial customers for decoupling.
Okay. Thank you. And Mr. Cook and Ms. Strauss, again, talking about perverse incentives, how do you view one versus the other, current system, business as usual versus a decoupled world or some sort of hybrid? How do you address the question of perverse incentive when you're getting away from a volumetric rate base?
I think the volumetric rate base obviously creates that bigger cost shift. So by increasing a customer charge or even going to a demand charge, it will lower that volatility that we see right now at the usage and sort of maybe even take away some of the decoupling.
Well, with Columbia's approach as a levelized distribution charge, that volatility certainly goes away. But with all the discussion here this morning, I just want to emphasize that this approach that Columbia favors is for non-cap residential customers only.
Okay. And not large industrials? It's
No,
just
not
residential.
at all. They are not included within our proposal.
Okay. And to build on the point, with straight fixed variable rate design, as you have in your LDC, are you concerned about the long-term marginal cost, that you're fully capturing that? Or are you're getting rid of some of the market signals that are in the more traditional system?
No, I don't find that concerning. I think that the LDC provides a proper price signal for the pipes, and then the commodity charge is still provided on a volumetric basis, which provides an efficient price signal.
Okay. And Mr. Miller, to your point, I mean, you threw out this idea of a 3% cap on moving, I think it was, on putting bounds on how much variability you could put in a bill. Is 3% a bit of a swag, or you said that it's rarely that large, but is there any reason to think that there's not a more elegant system than just a fixed 3%?
My understanding is that, and why Kia chose 3% is that generally in states that do have revenue decoupling and that also have caps, it's usually in between 1% and 5% of total revenues. 3% seemed like a relatively reasonable number that's adopted by a lot of states. And why a cap at all, I think, is an important thing to broach. And research done 2 or 3 years ago indicates that in decoupling adjustments in the gas and electric industries across the country, the band tends to be in between 1% and 2% for over half of all adjustments. And then as you approach kind of the 80% of all adjustment marks, you're in the 3% range. And then there's a couple of outliers where adjustments would be larger, but those are very small cases. So 3% seems to capture the majority of adjustments that would happen without intervention or without a cap. And then the purpose of the cap is obviously to prevent swings outside of reasonable adjustments to 5 or 6%.
And sort of a larger 30,000-foot question for all of you, if you have an interest in responding, but system efficiency, maximizing system efficiency over the long run, strikes me as a large driver in why we're having this conversation. Is there reason to believe that a decoupled mechanism is better at giving the right price signals for system efficiency from utility?
I'll take that first, Vice Chair. Unfortunately, I think my answer might be a 30,000-foot response. But Pennsylvania serves as a good example of kind of changing characteristics of the energy utility system. I think particularly post-Mercury air toxics rule, we've seen capacity shift away from large baseload coal plants. We've seen a lot of them shutter, convert to natural gas. And a system-wide approach that presents a couple different kind of opportunities to decide what to do. Does that generation get replaced? Do we add more lines for that to meet different loads? Or is there investment in energy efficiency and distributed generation and other advanced energy resources? States that have really aggressively pursued energy efficiency have been able to capture a lot of avoided costs. And in Pennsylvania, I believe it's $4 billion of net benefits of the Act 129 E, and C programs. And I believe transmission and distribution is part of that equation. So I think revenue decoupling by making utilities indifferent to whether load is increasing or decreasing makes those options, such as energy efficiency, which is the lowest cost energy resource, a bit more palatable because it doesn't represent a source of lost revenue. So I do think it can overall lead to greater system efficiency.
I'll just say that for the proper rate design, by doing the demand and fixed charge, you basically get to that network system that people have been talking about today, saying that you need to look at the distribution system as a network. And with your internet and as some other examples of garbage and stuff, you pay that sort of somewhat flat rate, and that's for the network or the distribution system, and that creates that proper price signal for customers. And then their usage or variable piece would come from their energy or generation and transmission charges.
Thank you. I would just add, as I testified to, having a levelized distribution charge does greatly help when we're doing an economic analysis to determine the feasibility of adding new load. It tells us what that fixed revenue amount is going to be, and we're not relying on the forecast of appliance and efficiency of appliances as well. So I do think it helps with the efficiency of the system.
And to build on that, thinking about smart rates, thinking about peak and off-peak and maximizing the efficiency of the system, does a decoupled mechanism, if you go into the weeds a bit, substantially help us move towards that, or is that an ancillary question?
I think that that's a question that's maybe more applicable to electric than gas, because we're not generally operating, time of use or peak and off-peak rates. So I don't know that that's as applicable to
but
pipes.
across the panel, do you think?
I think for the electric company, I mean, the time of use stuff is really on the generation and transmission side, which is the shopping piece that people can shop for. So that really wouldn't affect the distribution revenue or charges that we would send out.
Okay. And how much, the conversation about distributed generation, how much is that driving the move or the concern or interest in decoupling?
I definitely think it's, well, I wouldn't say it's the prime driver all by itself. I think it's definitely part of the system, or definitely part of the trend, the move towards lower energy usage and different sources of energy generation. I also think that those customers who tend to be particularly interested in investing in alternative energy resources, whether it be a Nest thermostat or smarter appliances, also tend to be interested in distributed generation. So I think when you look at all of those technologies bundled together, I think they have significant impacts on rate design in Pennsylvania, and really should be what's maybe driving the considerations for decoupling. I think the technology will only keep growing at an accelerated rate. Costs have really been coming down in that area.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry.
If I may, Mr. Vice Chairman, I have to say I don't have any answers, but I do have some questions and I have some concerns about system efficiency and system reliability. These things are very important to us, and I guess I'd like to urge that somehow, as we're focusing on what we're focusing on in the Commonwealth, as we should, we should maintain a broader view and a longer term view. I mean, it seems to be a lot of discussions we have with respect to alternative rate making and decoupling are in like the 3 to 5 or 6 year time frame, and we're limiting their scope to what's accessible and reachable inside the Commonwealth, and that's good, and we need to do that. But I'm concerned that there's a longer term set of challenges and a more widely cast set of challenges that we also have to be mindful of. When I think in terms of reliability and over the longer term, I'm reminded of the consequences of the polar vortex that we had back a couple years ago. We're concerned as industrials that a lot of our infrastructure, there just isn't enough of it, particularly in gas pipe in the ground. And every day as goes by, gas and electricity are more and more integrated and more closely linked, and they interact with each other. And not only is that infrastructure insufficient, a lot of it's old. And in order to keep up with it, there are going to be some big investments that a lot of people are going to have to make. They're going to be spread out over a long period of time. And a lot of these costs are fixed. And we need to make sure that whatever we do on the state level, as well as on the FERC level, we're keeping an eye towards making sure that we make those things happen that should happen with respect to system reliability, which industrials need and we're happy to pay for, and also system efficiency, which actually makes it work all the better for all of us. So I appreciate your question. I'd like to sign myself up as someone that shares the question and shares the concern, and hopefully we can continue to play a constructive part in the dialogue towards working our way through those answers and challenges.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. I also want to thank the panel here today. I do have a couple of questions. My first one is actually a follow-up on Tanya's testimony, and also a question that Commissioner Whitmer had asked, and that was about within our current statutory framework. I know that Columbia Gas had talked about, or Ms. Strauss had talked about, from NiSource had talked about, weather normalization. And in that, I think we only see that more so in the natural gas side of it. And I think it's because, or it may be because of what is in our Chapter 28 under the Public Utility Code, which came out of Act 129, and that talks about the recovery charges. And I think Tanya alluded to that. And for those persons that don't have the statute sitting there in front of you, let me read those two sections. And they talk about, except as set forth in paragraph 3, decreased revenues of an electric distribution company due to reduced energy consumption or changes in energy demand shall not be a recoverable cost under a reconcilable automatic adjustment clause. And then paragraph 3 is the decreased revenue and reduced energy consumption may be reflected in revenue and sales data used to calculate rates in a distribution-based rate proceeding filed by an electric distribution company under Section 1308. So my question, I guess, I throw out to the panel is, do we have some type of barriers right now in our public utility code that will allow us to, I guess, fully deploy some type of decoupling? Is the difference in the code that's part for the electric distribution companies and then the other side that seems a little bit more flexible for natural gas?
I think you have some barriers with the statute, and I think I addressed that in my testimony. And I think as to energy efficiency, although the General Assembly hasn't spoken as to specific energy efficiency in the gas side, the regulatory structure that they established in Act 129 is fairly comprehensive and gives an indication of their intention. As to other forms of adjustment clauses, obviously you have Section 1308A and Section 1307, and there are a number of regulatory and legal standards that accompany those statutes. And the Commission has used its authority under 1308A and under 1307 to include certain expenses that are volatile outside of the utility's control within these recovery mechanisms. And we do have a lot of surcharges. And I would say surcharges are alternative forms of regulation. So I think there's a combination of factors within the Public Utility Code, but I do think that at this point, the legislation would probably preclude a full revenue decoupling type mechanism.
You mean our current
The
statute?
current statutes, yeah.
Okay. I don't know if anyone else wanted to take a grab at that question.
Madam Chairman, we share that view, and we'll be providing our understanding of the statute and the specific citation and the reply comments due on the 16th.
Thank you. Another question that I have is, and I think directed more towards Kia, but anyone else, please feel free to answer. But it's more so talking about creating incentives for energy efficiency. So maybe if you can have some type of mechanism that can be implemented that will provide for incentives for utilities to promote energy efficiency.
Yes. So I believe Chairman Brown, as someone on the panel stated this morning, that performance incentive mechanisms are often included in states that pursue revenue decoupling. And I guess while some testimony views Act 129 as both carrot and a stick, I do believe that there's a lot of benefits to be had by providing extra carrots, for lack of a better phrase. Under the Commission's existing authority, it does appear that performance incentive mechanisms can be included for those utilities who take voluntary action. I think that's an important distinction between their Act 129 mandates, and can be included to really target specific areas of performance. It can either be voluntary exceedance of Act 129 goals that are tracked by the SWE, so tracking would be there, or it could be, I think, very innovative programs that reach those fixed usage energy consumers who are also low income, who have yet to be reached, as the OCA and others have indicated represent a source of serious concern about the impacts that alternative rate making might have. So I think they'd be very effective in that regard as well.
Thank you. Yes.
We've seen performance and incentive mechanisms in other states. And I'm sorry, is this better? We've seen performance incentive mechanisms on energy efficiency and incentives in other states, and we can talk about those in reply comments. But the concern I have with performance incentives this morning is who pays for them? I mean, where does that money come from? Is that going to be additional rate revenue? And if it is that going to be coupled to some additional benefit that the ratepayers received? And how is that benefit measured? And I just have a lot of questions about this idea of performance incentives mechanisms, at least with respect to their impact on large C&I customers. I mean, like I said, if you want to handle this in other customer classifications, that's your prerogative to do so. But I would urge that, given the set of challenges faced by large C&I customers in our situation in markets, performance incentive mechanisms takes what we think is already not quite a good idea and then makes it worse by layering additional costs onto it that, as I said, I don't know. I guess do we pay for that too?
Oh, I mean, that's a very good follow-up, Tanya.
Oh, I was
say
gonna
that's a very good follow-up question. I don't know if anyone wants to answer that.
Well, I would just echo the concerns that Dave has expressed, again, for all customer classes. When you layer performance incentives, someone has to pay for the performance incentive and for the additional energy efficiency programs. That seems to be adding additional costs on top of the revenue decoupling adjustment. I also have worked on a lot of performance incentive mechanisms, and one concern is that you need to make that mechanism something that truly is performance beyond what is expected. If you make it too easy to achieve, I'm not sure you're furthering any of the goals that you're really seeking to further.
Do we have any additional follow-up questions from the commissioners? No, if not, we will turn it back over to Judge Rainey today for their testimony. It has been very educational to me as well, learning this issue, which is a very difficult issue. Want to thank our emerging leader class for putting this together. They've done a great job. And we know that with hearing so much information and receiving so much information, we know that this is such a big issue. And the issue of decoupling is also important not only to those energy companies that have testified here today. We know our focus seems to have been on electric and natural gas, but we know that we have some of the water companies that have been here listening to this testimony. And I think that what we'll take back from this is to encourage our emerging leader class to look at not only the testimony, but look at whether or not they should bring a recommendation to us to have another en banc proceeding that would include our water companies to come and be able to provide some testimony as well. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and Commissioners. And if there is nothing further now, then I wish everyone Godspeed. Thank you again for appearing here today and your participation. And with that, then this hearing is adjourned.